Hello, my name is Jessica Del Castillo, and today I will be looking at the digestive system of three different animals. I will be looking at the starfish from phylum Echinodermata, the lancelet from phylum Chordata, and the crayfish from phylum Arthropoda. So all three different animals have a complete digestive system, which means that they each have a mouth and an anus. So food comes in through the mouth, it gets digested. Any nutrients that aren't absorbed exit out through the anus. So there is essentially only a one-way movement of food. So the starfish have these structures on the bottom of their feet that act as suction cups, and they're called tube feet, and they help with the direction of food into the starfish's mouth. The lancelet have these structures called the oral suri and the wheel organ. So if we were looking at this picture here, the wheel organ would be labeled for B and the oral suri would be labeled for A. So the wheel organ is ciliated, so to get food into its mouth, the cilia would beat against each other and it would cause a whirlpool of water that would get suctioned into the lancelet's mouth. And then the wheel organ helps to direct the food particles into the lancelet's pharynx. The oral suri act as fingers for the lancelet in that it helps to sift through the water to collect certain food particles that the lancelet would be able to digest. So since the lancelet lives in water and they get their food from the water, a lot of water is taken in when they're eating. So to prevent the digestion of this water, they have these gill slits that are seen here. There's over 100 of them that perforate the pharynx, and they help the lancelet to get rid of this excess water. And to prevent the food particles from exiting with the water, the lancelet coats its pharynx in mucus, and it essentially traps the food particles inside the pharynx. So as the water exits the lancelet's body, the food particles don't go along with it. And again, they just do this so that they don't have to keep digesting all kinds of water every time that they eat. So digestion for the starfish, they have these digestive glands here, which are seen by these green sac-looking structures, and they're in each of their arms, and they essentially just help the starfish to digest their food. So they secrete digestive enzymes in the starfish's stomach, and it helps to break down the food particles so that the starfish can absorb the nutrients from their food. The crayfish also have these digestive glands located just below their stomach. It's labeled over here number 4, and they do the same thing. They secrete digestive enzymes into their stomach so that it can further break apart their food so that their body can absorb the nutrients from it. Something that's really interesting about both the starfish and the crayfish is that they both have two stomachs. They have a cardiac stomach and a pyloric stomach. So for the starfish, digestion occurs first in the cardiac stomach. So digestive enzymes enter into the cardiac stomach. It helps break apart the food, and then digestion ends in the pyloric stomach, which further helps break apart the food. And then there's a small intestine that runs through the pyloric stomach and out through the anus so that waste could get eliminated. And then for the crayfish, the cardiac stomach acts as mastication for the crayfish, which I'll talk about later with the gastric mill. But the cardiac stomach is just to break apart food particles, just to chop it up. And then the pyloric stomach helps with the digestive enzymes to further break apart the nutrients so that the body can absorb them. And then the intestine would be seen here under number 2 is the heart, so the intestine would be seen underneath it, and then it would connect out to the anus so that waste could be eliminated. The lancelet is a little bit different, however. The lancelet doesn't have a distinct stomach like the starfish and the crayfish do. Instead, they have this structure in the intestine called the ileocolonic ring. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but it's just this section here in the intestine that the hepatic cecum meets with the food particles and it just digests the food particles as it does in starfish and crayfish. And then the digestive gland for the lancelet would be the hepatic cecum. It's this small structure here that's located just below the pharynx. And again, as the food passes through the pharynx, the hepatic cecum will release digestive enzymes into the ileocolonic ring inside of the intestine, and then it would just further break apart the food particles. And then it'll travel down the small intestine, get absorbed, and then any waste will be excreted out of the anus. So the lancelet doesn't have a distinct stomach like the starfish and the crayfish do. Instead, it's called the ileocolonic ring, and the hepatic cecum would be the digestive glands for the lancelet. For each of the three animals, they each don't have a jaw with teeth, so essentially there's no mastication that occurs. Instead, the starfish can perform this function that's really cool, where it can evert its cardiac stomach out of its mouth. So if we were to go back to the example of the mollusk, the starfish would use its 2 feet to pry open the shell of the mollusk, and then it would pull its cardiac stomach out through its mouth, dump all kinds of digestive enzymes inside of the shell of the mollusk to digest the insides, basically to churn it into this gooey mess, and then the cardiac stomach would ingest it back up, pull itself back into the body, and then continue the whole digestive process of pushing it down into the pyloric stomach, absorbing the nutrients in the pyloric ceca, and then excreting the waste out through the anus. The lancelet performs this mechanism that makes it look like the lancelet is coughing. So since the lancelet doesn't have a distinct jaw with teeth, it has no way of being able to chop up its food or digest it the way the starfish does. So instead, as it passes through the pharynx, it makes it look like the lancelet is coughing, and so the body does these slight jerking movements, and so it's basically sifting through the particles, and any particles that are too big or that aren't going to be able to be digested end up getting pushed back out through the mouth, and then the smaller particles are taken out through the body and then absorbed and distributed. The crayfish has this structure called the gastric mill, and as stated previously, the crayfish has a cardiac stomach and a pyloric stomach. Well, the gastric mill is only located in the cardiac stomach. So the gastric mill are these pictures here, and they're basically this razor sharp structure that act as the teeth for the crayfish. And so basically they just grind against each other, and like a blender, it chops up the food particles in its stomach into small little pieces. And then it makes it easier for the crayfish to be able to digest it inside of the pyloric stomach and absorb it inside of the intestines. So the crayfish doesn't have physical teeth, but with this gastric mill, this is like its teeth-like structure. So those are some comparisons and differences of the 3 different animals from the 3 different phylum. Hope you enjoyed. Thank you.